I think the hardest part of parenting is that they don't do it my way.
Right. Yes.
Learning to let that go, and then trusting. Not just trusting that God has a good plan for them and that he's working that plan out, but that it could take time.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody who's been involved in victim services or someone who's been like a chaplain in the RCMP, those kind of jobs. Well, Gay Spence is someone who's experienced that and been in difficult situations herself and has been put in difficult situations for the help and the good of others. And she talks about what that was like, and she talks about her journey to and finding God. She grew up in a home where she didn't know anything about God, and she discovered all of that later. She had a breakdown in her marriage. She's just had sort of one thing after another, but she's so vulnerable, she's so joyful, and she's so happy to be able to share that with other people to impact them in a positive way. So I know you're going to love her story. It's very, very powerful, and let's get into it. Okay, well, we have Gay Spence here with me today, and Gay, I'm so happy that we connected. I actually was kind of referred to you, and we tried to call back and forth, and we were like playing telephone tag, and we finally got to chat, and we had such a good conversation, and so I'm just so happy to have you here today. Gay is she works for the RCMP as a chaplain, and she's also done work with victim services. So you've got a lot of experience, Gay, and you've seen a lot of tough things, and
That's
done
right.
done a lot of hard work. But you've also done a lot of deep work on yourself, right? It's kind of pushed
Correct.
you to do that. So anyways, welcome
That's
to the
right.
Carla Rand Show, Gay. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I'm excited. This is so much fun.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so tell us about yourself first, because I want to get into all the, the deeper stuff. I want to go there, but I want to give our audience some context. So, where'd you grow up? Tell us about your family a little bit, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I was the oldest of two.
Okay.
And grew up all over the place. I've lived in over 48 places, mostly in Alberta, also in BC.
Wow.
So tons and tons of travel. I had to kind of get past my shyness and really be able to step into, hey, because we sometimes had 3 moves a year. So that means 3 schools a year.
Wow.
So it was challenging. My name is Gay. I learned not to say, hi, I'm Gay.
Yeah, right.
So I have a younger brother. My mom and dad grew up typical kids. My dad, I think, attended the Catholic Church a little bit when he was a child, but we grew up with no religion whatsoever, very strict family. And traveled around a ton until I moved to Innisfil, where I met my future husband. We ended up getting engaged very young, and we got married and moved around quite a bit in the first probably 10 years of our life. I had children right away. We had 2 beautiful boys. And then we kind of landed in Whitecourt. And Whitecourt was this place that really changed the course of my life. So we went through a lot of trauma. My husband and I actually separated for a period of time, and at our 10th wedding anniversary. Which is what God used to propel me forward. So I started looking for churches. I went to every church in Whitecourt, every single one. And when I landed at the Alliance Church, I just felt like this was home. And it was an interesting kind of concept for me, not ever feeling like any place really was home. And so it was a very emotional place. I'm not a crier, although I am an emotional girl. But I cried, I think, for the first 6 months in that church every time I went. And I was like, what is going on here?
Wow.
So my husband and I worked on our stuff, and we started attending church. Our family was new to church. And so we kind of stuck our big toe in and ended up just diving in head first. Before I knew it, I was volunteering with this group called GG's, God's Girls. And of course, I had boys, so I was like, this isn't going to work for me. So it really evolved quickly within 6 months to be a junior youth group. And as time went on, it became a junior senior youth group. I did a lot of educational pieces and got my pastoralship about, oh gosh, maybe 7 years ago. So I was leading the youth group for 16 years in total.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was really not anything I would have jumped into and said, yeah, this is what I want to do. It was really just God designed and God led. And so as I said, yes, he just pulled us in deeper. So fast forward, we're going to church, cute little family. We got all of our life together. Things are great. And then in my 18th year of marriage, life fell apart in a significant way. And I learned what it was really to walk in forgiveness. I think it's a concept we say flippantly. And forgiveness is something that I learned I had to do, moment by moment until it became hours, and then hours by hours until it became days, and days until it became weeks and months, and over the course of years. Our trauma impacted not only me or my children or our immediate family, it impacted every person we knew. And in White Court, it's hard to be a person that can kind of fly under the radar, especially as a youth pastor in the church.
Because White Court's a small town. White Court's a small town.
That's right.
I want to interject too. I met my husband. He's from Innisfail. So there's something about Innisfail, you guys. You got to head down there if you're not, if you're single.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so how much can you tell me about the trauma? Because you mentioned the trauma. Do you want to go into that, or do you want to just kind of talk about how it affected you?
Yeah, either way is fine. We're very public. We had to go very public with this because of my job.
Okay.
And at that point, we were just managing. So I was managing my life for 2 weeks. We had so much going on when we went into this. So I was preparing to take our youth group to Africa on a missions trip. We were taking 15 kids with us to Africa. Wow. We were heading into the summer season, which is a different transitional space for me as a pastor of young adults and youth. Mm-hmm. And so we had so much on our plate. I came home from YC. So YC, if you don't know, is a youth conference. It used to be held in Edmonton, and we would take our youth group there for the full weekend. When I came home that weekend, my husband sat me down and said he was leaving, that he had found another woman, and he left. And both my boys we just hit a wall. And, this cute little church family that life looks perfect on the outside fell apart. And, I really experienced Christ through the body in that way. And so for those of you that don't know much about church and much about the body of Christ, I'll tell you in some simple terms, I couldn't get up. I fell apart. I didn't see this coming. And I'm not a naive, churchy, woman. I came from really hard things in my past. And this really just shattered me. But I felt the tangible presence of Christ through my church family. So in that span of 2 weeks, somebody bought us groceries. Somebody took my speeding ticket off my fridge and paid it. I had a scripture verse come to me through text, through email. I had it sent in a card. I had it said to me verbally over 17 times. And it was Isaiah 43. And here's what it says. It says, when you go through the waters, you'll not be overcome. When you walk through the fires, you won't be burned, because I love you. And then he goes on to say, and I will call your kids from the east and tell the north to give up your sons and your daughters. And so I just clung to this scripture. I got up and I managed my days, and it was really this fuzzy, hazy experience. And I remember I was the football mom, because my oldest son was the football captain. And so we had made this commitment to go clean up garbage out of this field. and it was a fundraiser. And he said, "Oh, I'll stay with you, Mom." And I said, "No, go be with your friends. I'm okay." And I remember picking up this piece of rebar. And when I picked it up, the show, The Lord of the Rings, just hit me. And I flashed to this point in the movie where the fellowship is running through a mountain. And if you haven't seen the show, I'll try and set the stage quickly. So they're running through a mountain and they're being chased by a fire demon. And the wizard Gandalf is in the back. And so they get across this big bridge and they're running out of the tunnel of the mountain into freedom. And Gandalf turns and says to this fire demon, "You shall not pass." And as I picked up this piece of rebar, I felt God saying, "I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to stand firm." And I thought, well, what does that mean? How do I stand firm in this? I don't really have a choice in what's going on. And so I took this piece of rebar home, and my son was like, "What are you doing with that, Mom?" So I planted it in my front flower bed, and I thought, okay, God, I'm gonna do what you're calling me to do. And I don't know really what that means, but what you're gonna ask, I'll say yes to. So you guide and I'll follow. Fast forward a few weeks, and all of a sudden, my husband had this just Holy Spirit encounter, which is his story to tell. But how it crosses over with me is, I think it was like having this veil taken off his face, and he just understood what was going on, what was at risk, what he was about to lose. And so, he came home. We sat and talked. He disclosed everything. And I just couldn't have him stay at the house. It was so horrible. And it really impacted me how I move forward. Loving this man, but can I walk in a relationship with him after what we've gone through? And really having to learn what it meant to love in a different way. And that is a whole other story. But, fast forward, we did counseling, we did Christian counseling, we did financial counseling. We really had counseling from our pastor, and we walked in transparency. So 3 weeks after he left, we stood up in front of the whole church after our lead pastor preached on the prodigal son. Look it up if you don't know it. And it's this story of a man leaving and the grace to come home after he had used and abused his life story. And my lead pastor asked the church if they could stand behind us in prayer and support without gossip. And that we wouldn't commit to being able to make this work, but that we would be obedient to God. And the whole church stood up. It was such a humbling experience, and very difficult to be so transparent. And yet in those places, we felt God show up in such a tangible way. So over the course of the next 5 years, we worked really hard on our family and our marriage and restoring what was broken, letting go the pieces that we lost, and letting God replace some of those things with something better. And then, our story just doesn't quit like that, right? We had more trauma. Good friends of ours, their life blew up, and and he was a part of my youth group. He was a volunteer. He died of fentanyl overdose. We ended up adopting both their children, and adopting, teenagers it comes with its own challenges. Adopting girls that have trauma from childhood situations where parents are drug addicts and really good people, but just struggling to get their life together, was something I just never expected it to be so difficult. And even in that place, I felt like God was saying, how can we love better? How can we love deeper? And learning to, at that point, both our boys had moved out of the house. And so we were single, and allowing two younger girls to come back and live with us. After experiencing some freedom, I really had to let go and let God do some work in me just to say yes to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so life goes on.
So when you look
And
back, like when you're telling me this, Gay, I'm just kind of like, I'm like, oh, like, everything you say, oh, that's so hard. Oh, that's so hard. Like, that just seems so hard. When you look back at
yeah,
it now, how do you view
yeah,
that? Like your marriage,
it was.
for example. When you look back at that, what do you think of? Like, how has that
Yeah,
impacted you? How has that changed you? Or, what did you take from that?
right. Well, I think it's made me who I am today.
Mm.
It's really changed the course of my life. And so, really wanting to be somebody that shows up for people in a way that is unique. And so I was really drawn to victim services. It was a place where I could show up, I could help out, I could give them steps forward in some of the darkest times in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about me. They wouldn't remember me. They would just remember the support. And so I think walking through those hard things, it was hard. It has taught me that resiliency isn't something that we can just be flippant about. It's what we gain as we learn to go through hard things. And that is a natural byproduct, I think, that God puts in us as we are more transparent, as we allow other people to be a part of our story and a part of our journey, and to encourage us. We can't do this on our own. We need others. And the first thing we want to do when we go through trauma is disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most dangerous places to be, because we've been created to be in community, to walk through these hard things together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And to be in that place where you're, like you said, where you're like, I cannot do this on my own. And I think to be in that position, as hard as it is actually a real humbling, vulnerable, but like such a place to learn, because you're so needy. You're just like, help me, right?
Yeah.
And I think people that haven't experienced that, in some ways, I mean, God works in any way, but it can be a disadvantage, because I think sometimes you don't have as much empathy for other people, or you don't understand how much you need God, how much you need others, right? So would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think that God can use all things. He can work all things out. But I think that as we walk through the challenges of our life, and even COVID is a great experience, our life has not gotten easier. In fact, it's been more difficult. I went, that's my Great Dane.
Okay.
I went for a period of time where I realized that I needed to rebuild. I needed to let God rebuild in me. And so I took some respite. I went on a journey. I did the Camino de Santiago with my best friend. And so we walked across Spain, and I met with God in these incredibly tangible ways. I feel like he poured into me. And I feel like that was God's grace, because even harder things came when I got home that year. And so the year of 2020 was probably the hardest year of my life. And so that groundwork that he did in me, as I took the time to journey across Spain and to meet with him every day in such a tangible, significant way, really prepared the soil to be able to continue to endure, and not just endure, not just to survive, not just to live, although for a period of time, that's all I did, but to come out the other side, really trusting God, really being able to step into some tangible healing, and not just for myself, but for my family, for my friends, and for the people around me. And so those things grow us into the human beings that we are. So COVID for us has kind of been a little blip on the map, whereas for some people it's been such a challenging place for them to be. And even that God can use to grow us empathy, to help us to have passion and compassion, and really change the course of how we walk and journey together.
So how come you're a Christian? Like, would you, how come you know Jesus? How did that happen?
Right. Yeah, that's a great story, because I had no past experience with God at all. I didn't really know who Jesus was, except to be able to say maybe the Son of God. But when I was walking through some of the difficult times in our life, so when Jason and I separated, I was like, all right, well, I don't know if I believe that you actually are there, And I kind of felt like I was talking to the ceiling. And I said, but here's the deal. If you help me in my marriage, because the one thing that I can say is all through all this life situation that I've had with marriage and with my husband, him with me and me with him, we love each other. We love each other. We just have these broken pieces that we're trying to shove together. And sometimes it's not easy. And so I remember saying to God, if you show me that you're there, if I will seek you. And so I didn't even, of course, know anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything about biblical truth. And so one of the truths that God says is, if we seek him, we'll find him. And I did. I went to every church, all denominations. It didn't matter to me what it was. And I sought him.
Was that when you were in Whitecourt?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would have been 20 years ago. I'm dating myself now.
Okay.
So I remember sitting down in the Alliance Church. And I mean, it's not denominational, but that's where I happened to land. That's where I felt at home.
Yeah.
And just having this sense of God. And I think even him softening my heart over the days that followed, until I was like confronted with this idea that this God loves me so much that he would send his son to save me. It hit me like a ton of bricks almost over the head. And I just remember falling to my knees and saying, I need that. I didn't have an understanding of sin. I didn't really have an understanding of repentance. I just knew that what he was offering, I needed at a soul level. And so I kind of just said, I need you, and what you have, I need. And I don't know what I have to do to get that. And I just felt like he said, nothing. You need nothing more than to say you need me. And so I think I walked around for 3 weeks with this smile on my face, not really understanding all of it, but just knowing that it was going to be okay, that he wasn't going to go away, and that we had time. And so I just had this hunger and thirst to learn about him. And he was so good to bring around people and places and circumstances where I was able to be fed and be fed in a way that I could little girl in Alberta, I have dyslexia. I struggle with learning, and man, this stuff I caught. I just understood it. And as I went along, I started to realize it probably wasn't so much me as God helping me to understand these things. And it just made me want more and more of him.
Yeah. So what did you learn, like from going through that victim services, right? Like you're helping people in their moment of absolute crisis. They just lost a loved one. They just had to say, goodbye to somebody that they care about. What has that done for you? Like how has that affected you? Because a lot of people can't handle that, right? Like there's people that do this type of work and they just, they do it for a while and then they're just like, I cannot do this anymore. How did you handle that? How has that affected you?
I think one of the things that helps me to walk through that, to be able to walk through that journey was, first of all, God. I knew that he would come with me wherever I was. It didn't really matter where I was going. He would be there. And so that gave me, that brave heart to step into it. Sometimes I would think, who am I to go to these places and help these people? There's not enough training in the world to make you feel like you are able to be there, but just showing up and being present. We had so much good training. We were able to give them next steps and real basic things like, okay, this is where your loved one's going. Either that's the medical examiner's office or maybe a funeral home. From that point, this is what this looks like. Just basic common sense stuff. But at that point, everybody sort of needs that guidance and that help. Just being there and supporting, sitting with people and showing love and compassion. Possibly in Alberta, if your loved one dies at home and it's a natural death or not a suspicious death, then the funeral home comes to pick your loved one up. You could be there for, hours waiting. You could leave, but somebody needs to be there. And so some people want to stay. And that is our job at Victim Services, is to help them through that process. Mm-hmm. Some of them want to go, and our job is to help them to go. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, Victim Services is such an incredible service. It really does support people through notification of their loved one's loss, through helping them to go and ID their loved one. Mm. It's such a wide range of trauma, but anything that is criminally based as well, they support you through. So if you've been robbed, raped, they're there. And so really good training, but also for me, recognizing this isn't my trauma. This is somebody else's trauma. I can go support them through it. And I think understanding the importance of separating myself from their trauma and offering support, because that's what I needed when I was going through my stuff. I didn't need somebody that would connect and emotionally fall apart. I needed somebody that could help me go through it when I was emotionally falling apart.
Right. Yes. And what would you say is the hardest part of your work? And I don't know if you could be talking about victim services, maybe as a chaplain, right, or maybe even as like a mom or whatever. What has been some of the hardest things about some of the work that you've had to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say it goes back to my own personal family, watching my family struggle with their own unique issues and feeling trapped or stuck. And wanting to offer them something to really help them to move forward. But also know that it's not my journey. And I can be a part of it and an encourager. And I can bring really good tools, but I can't make anybody, move forward any faster or any different than they are. But knowing, I think for me, always knowing that there's hope for something good, something better to come out of any situation that my friends, my family, my loved ones walk through.
Yeah, it is true. Watching somebody else going through something tough is hard because especially as a parent, right? Because you just want to go and you want to make it all better, but it's their journey. And sometimes you just have to watch it play out because you know what's going to happen and you want to prevent it. But like you said, it's their story. They kind of have to sometimes learn the hard way. You can guide them and try to direct them, but ultimately they make their own call.
That's right.
Especially as a
and and I can say, you look at my family, so we have 2 biological boys and 2 adopted girls. Both sets of kids come with their own trauma, whether biological or not. And they both have worked through their own stuff at their own pace when they're ready. And I think, as a parent, what I can do is pray. And that is a lot, to be able to go to God in prayer for our kids, I think is one of the biggest gifts that we can give our children. And then support and love, to be able to support them, love them, speak some truth when they need to hear some truth, and then leave it with them to work those things out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I'm so thankful that for my praying parents. And I remember when I was going through a really tough, really rough patch, Mom's like, I've been praying for you. I'm like, stop praying for me. Because God's taken me through something. And of course, when you're at the other side, you realize what he's doing and it's all good. But in the minute you're like, please just stop praying these prayers for me. I mean, she wasn't praying for me to obviously go through rough times, but she was praying obviously for growth or whatever. And God decided how he was going to do that. So, you never know how your prayers might be answered. Things might get a lot worse before they get better. You just never know. Or they may appear worse before they get better. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So what's been the hardest thing about motherhood then? Would you say it's just watching your kids experience? Because, you've had a lot of different, you've got your own kids and then these adopted daughters, right? As teenagers with all their stuff. What's kind of been the hardest part about that?
I think the hardest part of parenting is that they don't do it my way.
Right. Yes.
Learning to let that go. And then trusting not just trusting that God has a good plan for them and that he's working that plan out, but that it could take time. And maybe they will have to journey through some difficult places, just like I had to, just like my husband has had to, just like most people that we know have had to go through hard places. As a parent, we want our kids to have these easy, simple, beautiful lives. And what I'm learning is that sometimes that's my great day. Sometimes, most times, there is such beauty, such depth, and such growth in the difficulties. And so learning to really be okay that my kids will walk through their hardships and really black and dark places, and that it's okay. God's got a plan for them, and that it may take longer than I want it to, but I can trust at the end of the day. That's been hard, is to learn to trust not only God, but them as they walk through and journey those places. But my kids are so strong, and they have had to overcome so much, but it's beautiful to watch them and to be a part of it.
And how has motherhood, like being a mom, how has that changed you as a person?
I think that I'm far more gracious and more passionate. I've always been this kind of passionate pastor, and in youth group, I'm always kind of on fire, whether I'm crying or, I can be a very passionate person. And I think that has probably increased since I've become a mom. And and I think really passionate about their lives in places where maybe they're struggling to have passion. I have passion, and where they're struggling to have hope, I can have such hope because I know that it comes from Christ. And, so I would say I'm more passionate in my life because of children.
Wow. Yeah, I would agree. Like from my perspective, I think, by being a wife, by being a mother, I think it sort of amplifies the passions that you have, because you're not only looking at yourself and other people, but you're looking at all these other loved ones that are so close to you. And I think it can just whether it's like the mama bear idea or whether it's just the protective or whatever, it amplifies it. It's like all these little mirrors all around you, kind of.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't matter where I'm preaching or when I'm preaching, I'm always preaching to you. Always. I always want to be able to preach to youth. And for me, preaching to my youth aged kids, my personal children, has always been part of the way I'm made up. So just to really want to encourage my kids and to see them walk in victory is a passion that I have, not just for my own kids, but for youth in general.
Yeah.
And it just bleeds out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can sense that. With you. And I would guess, Gay, are you a bit of an extrovert? Possibly. That would be my guess.
I would say actually probably not.
Oh, okay.
I would say that I have some tendencies to be an extrovert, but that I need my own quiet time to kind of refuel with God and reconnect and spend quiet time. But I also think living in so many different places and growing up in so many different communities, I had to learn to come out of my shell, because if I didn't, I would have, I think, gotten bullied more so than I had because of my name, but also just got lost in the mix because we moved so much. So sometimes I feel like being an extrovert is a survival technique I learned.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Because if you're bold and you put yourself out there, people are less likely to come up against you. Because when you appear confident, they're kind of like, oh, well, she might roast me or something if I come up with something. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's interesting, though. That's interesting. And what a shame, that people get bullied for their name or for their, appearance or for any number of things, right, that people will find. I know I've had different people on that have talked about different ways that they've got bullied. And like in your case, it's your name. Other people, it's because they're too fat. Other people, it's because they're too skinny. Other people, it's because they're too tall, too short. Like, the bullies will find any reason to pick on you. So if you can
and
find
one thing I will say, as I learned such incredible resilience because of my name.
Mm,
There was a period of time in my life where I would only go by the name Linda.
okay.
But as we go through these challenges, it builds resiliency in a way that we just can't understand.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to ask you, okay, this is kind of like our final question, but
Okay.
Gay, what would you say is your message to the world? Like, if you could
Yeah.
say one thing, what is your message? What is your passion? How would you
Yeah.
answer that?
I think really to boil it down in the simplest terms that I know is that we are stronger together. We've been created and designed to be in community, walking in transparency with friends and family. Is what gives us the strength to walk through the challenges ahead. It's how the Spirit of God shows up as the body of Christ in a tangible way. And that God's plan is for a hope and for a future. And so I think the thing I would say today is if you're struggling, if you're feeling like you've lost this sense of hope, if you're not even sure that you have a future or what that future could be, I would say hold on, reach out. We are created to be together. And through that transparency, man, we can encourage each other to walk through the difficult places.
Yeah, that's so powerful and so true. I think for people that have gone through hard times to just know that there are people there that are willing to help you, but you have to take that first step because people don't know. And it tends to be, like you said, when you're going through something hard, you tend to withdraw. You're not usually running around with your hand up saying, help me, I'm a mess, right? Usually you're like, I'm fine, I'm stoic, I can handle this. And you don't want to let on that anything's wrong. So sometimes you just have to let on and say, you know what, I'm really struggling right now. And it could just be a quick, hey, I'm having a hard time. That could be all it is to start with.
And I have this really good friend, Michelle. She's a pastor or was a pastor up in the Grand Prairie area. And one of my favorite quotes from her is that it doesn't matter what you call it, shit, manure, crap. Jesus was born into a stable full of it.
Right.
So that he could meet us in our shit, our crap, our manure. And it's such a true understanding that we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to be perfect. Our stuff is our stuff, and he meets us in it.
No matter what. Yeah.
That's right.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Gay. So where do people, like, if people, by the way, if they're listening, if you guys are listening right now and you do want to reach out, certainly reach out to me. What if they want to reach out to you or just learn more about you? Where's the best place for them to go for that?
I think you could maybe reach out to me on Facebook.
Okay.
And I'm always available through text.
Okay. Yeah. And if you don't know how to get through to Gay, just message me and I will make sure that I connect the two of you. Because we are here to help. And often it is just like getting on a call with somebody or even messaging back and forth. Like I have this, this one girl that just messages me quite often, hey, can you pray for me? I'm struggling right now. Right. And that's okay. Like sometimes it can just be something simple just to know that, hey, there's somebody there,
That's right. Yeah.
So good. Well, thank you so much, Gay, for sharing your story and just for being vulnerable with us. I just really appreciate it.
Thanks. I really had a lot of fun being here today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.